Hello, this is going to be a quick start guide for our temporal network visualization application. So when you download the application, you'll probably get in some form of a zip file. And in order to unzip that, you can just double click on it and it should make a folder of the same name right above it. If we open that folder, we can see the network formation application, and we can double click on that to actually open the application. So here's the application. The first thing you'll need to do is actually give the application some data to run on. The application was made with temporal networks in mind, but it can also visualize static networks if that's what you want. So all the settings to change how data is visualized is going to be in the data settings. At the very top, you can see you can select a file, but before we do that, I just want to quickly go over the expected data format. So right now we only take CSV files, and they must be formatted as a temporal adjacency list as shown here. So each row is going to represent an edge in your network, and that edge is going to go from the node in column 1 to the node in column 2. Column 3 will represent the time that edge is created between those two nodes, and column 4 will be the weight of that edge. Sorry. If your data doesn't have like weight data for the edges, you can just make that entire column ones. Here I'll show you some example data that I have that I'll be using today. So you can see here that the first column is the source, the second column is the target, third column is the time, and the fourth column is the weight. Also note that the time column must be some sort of float or number, not a date format. I'll show you how to convert that back to a date in the application, but it has to be some sort of number. And then the following columns is ring, request ID, and request time are all attributes, additional attributes that can also be visualized within the application, and these can be whatever you want them to be. Also note that the source node and the target node don't have to be numbers. They can be any string, anything that you want them to be, a name. They're just numbers in this case. Cool. Now that I've gone over that, we'll go back into the application, and I can click the browse button here to open a window. Actually, you can't see it, but it opened my file manager. I'll show kind of what's happening. But it should open your file browser to some folder. You can go in to the folder, to some folder structure, and find your CSV file. In this case, mine's here. I'll use that same CSV file that I just showed you previously, so that will be this full data guy at the bottom, full data. And once I select that, you can hit open, and that should open the CSV. And you'll know here because it'll filled in this this little space with the name of the file. Now since this is a quick start guide, I don't want to go over all of these settings in detail. I'll go over a couple of them quickly. So you can display the name of the node above the node. Here is physics for attraction or repulsion of nodes, and then some visualizations, color visualizations, and size visualizations. You can see in general all the node-based settings here on the left and all the connection-based settings here on the right. But you can leave most of the settings as is, and you should get a pretty good simulation out of the box. But if you want to know anything more about any of these settings, you can click on this question mark button, and that'll provide a tooltip at the bottom here, giving a better description of what each of these settings does. Cool. Now that we've gotten to that, go back, and before we hit start, I quickly want to go through the playback settings. So as I mentioned earlier, the time has to come in as a number, but here are the settings where we can convert that back to a date or a time in the setting. We have some time presets here, of some common ones, but you can go through here and select a unit that your time is in, and then the start date, so when that number is 0, what is the date? And then from there, it'll calculate out the date for every single item in your data. Cool. I'm going to choose the Google Sheets here, which is time, unit, day, and all this data, and then I'll go back. Again, all these timeline bins, and here you can change the screen resolution and make it full screen. I'll leave that all as is for now. Alright, so now I can hit start on the simulation, and that'll pull up the simulation window. First thing I want to go over is how to look around the simulation window. If you hold down right click on your mouse and then move your mouse around, you can look around the scene. And while you're still, and then if you want to like move the camera around, you use W to move forward, S to move back, D to move right, and A to move left. So they're kind of like arrow keys on your keyboard. Then you can move around and look up and kind of move around the window or the scene like that. Cool. On the left here, you're going to have a bunch of panes, and these actually expose those same settings that I showed you earlier here. So if you want to change them at runtime and you can kind of see more interactively what these settings do, you can change those here, and I might do some of that. And so there are tons of settings. Each one of these little squares is going to open a different settings panel for you. At the bottom here is that same tooltip. So if I click one of these question marks over here, I'll show a tooltip for that item. On the right, here's a timeline. This will show the general activity of the network at certain times. So current time is at this tick right here, and then when I hit play, it'll start to play through. Which I'll hit play, and you can see the timeline starts to move as we go towards more activity. So here we can see as nodes spawn in as time occurs. I'll pause it here. So one thing you might notice, by default, connections will fade out over time. It's just to make sure super complicated networks don't get too complicated too fast. But we can actually go into the connection settings here. If we go to connection settings and there's this setting for connections fade out, I'll untick that, and now the connections will stay around forever. Cool. So now that that's going, I'll pause it again. And we can see that the network's getting more complicated. Again, you can move around with WASD and right mouse button. If your network is going too slow, of the simulations we want to go faster or slower, you can use these speed buttons. I just clicked on the speed, and then you can change the speed of the simulation either to go slower or faster. Here it's going at 1, so I can make this 2 or 3 or 0.5 to change the speed of the simulation. Finally, you can, if you click on this first box, you can also see a selected node. So if I go around and select a node by clicking on it, it'll zoom in on that node, and over here it'll show some data about that node. Right now it's just showing the node ID and the number of connections it has. So if I click on this one, it'll show a new node ID, number of connections, and zoom in on it so you can see exactly where it is in the network. A couple more interesting settings. You can do tons of visualizations. So I'm going, so yeah. If you want to restart the simulation, you can click on restart, and we can go back to the main menu by clicking on the main menu button, which will bring us back to the main menu, and you can go back and play around with all the settings. So this has been a quick start to the network visualization application. Have fun and play around with it.